Today we celebrate the feast of the conversion of St. Paul. And therefore, we are invited to reflect on how we can bring about conversion in the lives of people. Those who have no faith, those whose faith are shaky, those who have not yet fully subscribed to the gospel. And so, in the light of today's scripture readings, we recall the declaration that the dicasteries of the doctrine of faith issued in December on Fiducia Supplicans, which means the pastoral meaning of blessing. It is important for us to understand the motivation of this declaration. When this declaration was made, those who are in favor of same-sex union, they were overjoyed that at last the church recognized their legitimacy of same-sex union, which of course was never the case of the declaration. On the other hand, there were many who were dismayed and confused, thinking that the church has been subtly endorsing same-sex union, and it will be a matter of time before the church will normalize this same-sex union, which is, of course, again, the declaration makes it clear that the church only recognizes the marriage that has been taught in Scripture between man and woman. And so it's important for us, in the light of this document, in understanding the question of conversion, then we need to really try to understand the heart of the gospel, the motive of Pope Francis in allowing this document to be issued. The whole pontifical thrust of Pope Francis, one word summarizes it all. The very fact that all the documents that he wrote, all the letters, the first letter was the joy of the gospel. And then recently there was this change in the Curia, Predicate Evangelium. He makes sure reforms are taking place not just in terms of doctrines, but in terms of the Curia, so that the church can be more effective in evangelizing. And so when we talk about evangelizing, of course, it's just not evangelizing to people without faith, even to those people within the church, but the faith could be lacking or not in accordance with the Scripture. And so for Pope Francis, he is very clear. The only way to bring about conversion is to help people to encounter the love and mercy of God. That is the only way that people will be brought to faith. And so, in endorsing this declaration, Pope Francis believes that the way we could bring people who, even though might be baptized, are now outside the church, or they are not coming to the church regularly because they feel unworthy, because they feel that they are marginalized, they are judged. And so, as a result, these people who are struggling with their faith, at the same time, there is this seed of faith in them. They really want to live the gospel life. They want to be part of the church. But because of the rejection, some of them would not just refuse to come to church or stay away from the church, but Pope Francis is even more worried that eventually they will just lose the faith. And not only lose the faith, they will, because of the lack of pastoral care for them, they will fall into greater sin. It's not just same-sex union, but other sins as well, because they are deprived of pastoral care. And that is why the declaration makes it clear that those people who are seeking for God's mercy, or those people who trust God, we must minister to them. We need to pray with them, to pray for them, that they will receive God's mercy and, of course, come to the fullness of truth, that we will help them to search for God's will in their life. And that is what they are asking for, because the truth is that even those people in that kind of situation, whether they're same-sex or whether they're divorced, remarried, and so on, These are the people that are trying to reconcile their way of life, their own personal needs with the gospel. And it's a struggle for them because some, for various reasons, could not fully identify themselves with what the scriptures requires of them. And so they are struggling. And Pope Francis says we need to therefore journey with them. We need to help them to experience God's mercy and love so that they will come to know the fullness of truth. And that is very clear because the church is always called to be a church of mercy, a church of compassion, that people could recognize that even though they are sinners, and who is not the sinner anyway, that we all, the fact that we are still sinners, we are coming to church. In fact, only sinners come to church. If you're not a sinner, what for you come to church? And so there are different kinds of sinners, by the way. Not all sinners are the same. We have different kinds of sin, different kinds of weaknesses. We should therefore not marginalize or not categorize that this sin, is the worst and should be excluded. Other people gossiping also, terrible gossiping. It's even the worst sin. So it's a question of the fact that we all need God's mercy. And it is within this context that we celebrate the conversion of St. Paul, because St. Paul precisely, we read in the first letter of Timothy, in chapter 1, he says that he was a persecutor of the way, as we read in today's first reading as well. He was persecuting the Christian, putting them in prison, and even killing some of them. And he did it because he was ignorant. And he did it because he wanted to save his people. He was ignorant, but he was a man with zeal for the faith. That's why God truly knows who to choose. Just like St. Augustine, just like St. Paul. Because St. Paul was such a great sinner. And God knew this man has zeal, has passion, has conviction, but in the wrong place. So what St. Paul or Saul then needed was to experience the love and mercy of God. And that is why St. Paul was considered a real apostle, because the Lord revealed himself to him. Because to be an apostle, you must have seen the risen Lord. To be an apostle, you must be called. Saul saw the risen Lord in that light which could not be explained. He heard the voice, "Why are you persecuting me?" And the Lord called him to be his apostle to the Gentiles. That is why St. Paul, although he was not among the 12, and not during the time of Jesus where he was walking around with Jesus, he was still considered an apostle, a real apostle, because he was called. He has seen the risen Lord. And he was called to reach out to the Gentiles. And this was in spite of misgiving, In fact, when God told Ananias, "Can you please go and see him, pray over him, heal him, get him baptized, and insert him into the Christian community," Ananias says, "This man is a persecutor. How could we take him? It's dangerous. All of us will run away when he comes into the Christian community. We have nothing to do with him." And God said, "You just do. Do what I say." And indeed, Ananias, in obedience to God, brought St. Paul to be baptized and to be healed of his blindness, and he became a great apostle. And St. Paul, recounting this, said it was simply unimaginable. First and foremost, to have heard the Lord, to have seen him, was already a great grace. And then to be accepted by the Christian that he was persecuting itself is also unimaginable, that he could be forgiven. And Ananias, when he saw Paul, he said, "Brother Saul." This one persecutor, he called him Brother Saul. I think Saul must be, "Oh my, I'm now his brother, not his enemy." Forgiveness of the Christian community. And the most ridiculous thing I think St. Paul felt was that he was chosen to be an apostle to the Gentile. He was totally unworthy. And therefore, in the letter of St. Paul to Timothy, he says, "It is really so that I can be a model of God's mercy and compassion to others, so that none of us should ever lose faith that God will not forgive us. None of us should ever lose faith that we are not worthy of his love." And it is based on this that the centrality of St. Paul's teaching, justification by faith through grace alone. It is not our good works, it is not what we do, but it is really God's mercy. And I think it's very important for us as we celebrate this Eucharist that we need to renew His love and mercy for us. We need to be conscious of that love and mercy. Otherwise, our faith will become weak because we are no longer grateful. That is why this entitlement mentality. But for those of us, we feel that we are really not worthy. And the gratitude will change us. Gratitude makes us grateful. And when we are grateful, then when we look at fellow sinners, we won't be so judgmental. We also know that they are struggling. And we also know that we want to mediate the mercy and compassion of God to them. And so it is Pope Francis' really conviction that if we embrace people with love and mercy, they will experience the love of God in and through us. And once being led to God, then God will be able to work in them and will be able to transform them and to heal them, and most of all, to lead them to the fullness of truth.